or influenced by transformative technologies today. So we have the ability to contribute to solving the purpose problem through these things. And so there's a couple of theories about what makes happiness. Some say it's purpose, autonomy, and mastery. This is one of my favorite economists, is a guy named Umar Haque from the UK. And he describes happiness as the expression of possibility. And he describes anger as the frustration of possibility and sadness as the loss of possibility. And you can read the rest, but he says that the only security is in growth and a sense of purpose, because this is a sense of possibility. And then Yuval Harari, who I just love. You guys, anything Yuval Harari is required reading for a transformative tech entrepreneur. But one of the things that he talks about is that what has given mankind dominance is our imaginations, our ability to tell stories about those imaginations. And so the next thing is, Yuval's point of view is that the future, the next human agenda is about longevity, happiness, and augmentation, because the world is, in fact, actually better than it's ever been in many ways, despite the scary news. There are more girls in school, there's more electricity, the number of people who are living on below $1 a day has been dramatically decreased. And there's several more. There's another book that I'll give you as a also required reading, potential required reading. So this framework is like, this is what's coming. And so humanity, we need a new narrative. We need a new level of self-awareness and mental and emotional health. And this is the beginning of the framework, just to set you on the, the very broad, this is just to set you on sort of like the very broad sense of what's coming for mankind, and how we can think about it. And it's also why, what I told you is also why the conference is this year, the future of human possibility. Because we really have to talk about and think about, like, what is next for the human mind. And you guys are central and core to that, in my opinion. So then, to break down what's driving demand, this, I don't expect you to read it. It's available online and I'll send it to you. But this was when I first got into transformative technology. This is the map that I used to lay out for myself all of the things that were really sort of driving why this technology was happening. This was also to communicate. This was also for myself, because when I first got into this space, a lot of times when I would chat with people, they couldn't necessarily get what I was doing. And so this was also for me to confirm for myself what I saw. But then this is the important part too. So Maslow's hierarchy again, what's happening with technology, and I'll show you guys a little bit later, is the ability to move up the hierarchy. So traditional tech really has just done the bottom two layers. But transformative tech, and much of what many of you are working on, will give us access. Now, I'm not saying there are fantastic products yet, but it will give us access to what's coming and what's possible. And so this is, the last numbers that I pulled together. When you guys get this deck, you'll be able to get all of the sources. Many of you who are working on sleep or wellness or other things, you'll be able to find these resources for yourself. But this is just sort of a quick overview. But all of this together, cost plus what people are spending today. This is what people are spending today. These are not estimates, except for there's a couple of estimates in here. But really, these are what people are spending today. And so many of you, your products are going against these things. And this is what people are spending today to try to get at the top of this triangle. That's what they're trying to do. And so this is just a snapshot of the US and Europe. But you can see, you have things like young people already spending a fourth of their disposable income on well-being and wellness. And I apologize, this is just the US. I have other slides with other regions, but it's we don't have a lot of time. And then you have things like the number of them who already own a fitness wearable. The reason why that's important is because the same thing that is used for counting calories often can pick up that HRV signal, at least in the newer models. And so you probably saw maybe the Apple Watch yesterday that they announced the other day. It's got an ECG in it. All of these things have relevance for tracking psychological state, in addition to tracking the physiological state. And so all of these things that you guys are things that you guys can hack in order to include an element in your products that allow people to understand and have an external measurement of what's happening to them internally. And I'll show you an example of why that's actually really powerful for many people, especially as we're sort of reaching, beyond to a wider market. Okay. So this is just you guys can read this later, but for all of you who are being trend watchers, some of the major sources that I use are Gallup, the Gallup and Pew. They track 5 areas of well-being. The Edelman Global Trust Index is really important. It's one of the things that's driving why people culturally are interested and willing to use transformative technologies, is because all around the world, the level of trust that people have in the things that they traditionally trusted. So government, religions, media, they trust them less. And so because of that, it's driving some of the other things that you saw, sort of like an increased desire and need for community and, all of these other things. And so this tension and pressure that's happening is actually one of the reasons why people are going to want the products that you have, because they need them. They need them. Fletcher Knight also has amazing trends as well that you can that are easy to look at. Okay. This is trend watching is another one. This is a wall of text. It's in the deck so that you can look at it later. But they go through the global trends for betterment, which is the universal quest for self-improvement, or joining, the core instinct to connect with others. And then all of this is influenced by the ubiquitousness of technology. So this is as a resource for you guys. So then this last section is means. Why and how is this possible? You guys have heard me talk about abundance and being on that all of our technology is on an exponential curve. All of our technology is on an exponential curve. So I'm going to share that screen with you. Sometimes, sorry if I was just talking and you saw my face instead of the screen because I got too excited. So this is the exponential curve. Can everybody see the deck right now? Is the deck up? Okay. Yeah, so the deck is, I believe that the deck is up so you can see it. Okay, so this is the exponential curve. So all of our technologies are on exponential curves. This book, Abundance, is one of the best books for really understanding what's happening and how these curves are affecting wider society. This is an overview by Tim Chang, and he's going to send links to something specific. But these are like all of the tech disruptions that are really driving society, from everything from computer vision to voice as a platform to AI and augmented humans. I mean, tremendous forces. Tim is someone who you're going to hear from later in the course. He was one of the very first people watching quantified self. Quantified self turned into wearables. Wearables eventually turned into transformative tech, or facilitated transformative tech. And then you guys saw this from the website when you signed up. What all of this means is that technology can help humans in ways that people historically have not expected. Driven by the exponential technologies, these are the major areas of technology that we look at. If you look at my Medium post, which I will include in the links to you, we've got like really detailed, this you would have seen it in the list of like, what is a transformative technology? So there's like very detailed, dense list of the types of companies and the types of technologies that are in this space. So here's one of the takeaways, is that technology isn't bad. Whoops. Technology isn't bad. It's just not good enough yet. So technology isn't bad. It's just that it is not good enough yet. And this is where I stress again, we are the designers and we have the ability to design technology to meet our needs, do what we wanted to do, to insist that it serve us. And so I also love this quote that I'm going to put up for you. And this is from Naval, who's a friend and also founded Angel List. So this founder mentality, and this is for the entrepreneurs and the innovators, because I think you can have a founder mentality in government, you can have a founder mentality in corporations, you can be crazy all over the place. But it's like, once an opportunity or a task is identified, you will not stop. And there's an unlimited demand for this founder mentality, which is also what are the problems that we want to solve with this technology. So this is the framing of how I think about transformative tech. Many products go into these 4 buckets: assess, amplify, enhance, connect. So imagine for a moment if you knew yourself better than Facebook did. And if you knew yourself better than your phone did, because right now your phone knows more about you than your mother. Your phone knows what time you wake up. Your phone knows what time you go to sleep. Your phone knows how much time you're on the phone, how much time you're on different apps. And so imagine having that level of self-understanding and assessment power for yourself. So that's the first thing to contemplate. Then the next part of the frame is amplification. So what this is many people, this is Gary Kasparov, and he lost to Deep Blue. The way he responded to that loss was to study everything he could about AI and create a new category called advanced freestyle or centaur chess. And his question was, could it be the most perfect game ever if you played with a computer at your side? And so what this category has shown, and what games and AI has shown, is that when humans play AI alone, most often with games, the AIs win. But when a human AI unit plays AI alone, the human AI unit wins. And so for those of you who are making products like the coaching products that provide coaches with assessment power, that is essentially amplification. And so we can have centaur mentors and centaur therapists and centaur teachers and centaur knowledge transfer of any kind of soft social emotional skill. You can have a human being one-to-one backed up by the power of what a machine or what a computer can do. So this is another category. This is an enhancement category, and this is all about enhancing self-awareness. So the Santa Clara Police Department was an example. They did a heart rate variability sensor training. And so they trained people to recognize their heart rate variability, to train their heart rate variability, and in order to understand when they were switching into chronic stress. This had, and I'll send you the write-up on this in the paper, the scientific paper, but the effect that this had on stress, which also reduced overreactions. You know, military and police populations tend to have over-index on stress, suicide. If you think about all of the people in the world who are dealing with PTSD, sort of anyone who's in a high stress environment, the ability to use sensor-based training, which now, you know, one of the things you're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years are very advanced sensors just on the phone, because right now the phone can already pick up a lot with the camera. You can pick up heart rate through the camera, a bunch of other things. Heart rate variability is next because it's all about the math. We all know what, we all know what it means when it's just about the math, figuring that out. This is an example of connection, and I put this on here. It's, a small example, but really to sort of challenge how you think about technology. These rings are called touch, and wherever you are in the world, whoever has the other ring can feel your heartbeat and you can feel theirs. So people don't often think about technology creating intimacy and bringing people together. And this is an example of that. So is this one. I love this. This just always it makes me laugh and makes me smile. That is the Huggies pregnancy belt. And what that is, actually, let me pull it back up so you can see it. So, what this is it's a belt that allows the man or the partner to be able to feel the kicks of the baby in the exact spot that they are for the mother. And, as you can see from this screenshot, it's like it was incredibly emotional for the men because, one of the things, there's a thing called prosiopeia that, I might have said that wrong, but basically it's your understanding where your body ends and I don't know if that's, I can just stop sharing. Okay, great, I just figured something out. Where your body ends and the other one begins. So the difference between putting your hand out to touch a baby, to touch a stomach with a baby in it, and putting your hand on your own tummy to touch a baby with to touch is different. It's kind of fun that, thanks, Jack. He put the right word in there. Sorry, I'm just going really fast. So this is just an example of kind of what's beautiful, and why you can approach, as you're thinking about what problems you're approaching or how to expand the problems you're approaching with your current products. You can really expand how you think about it. Let's see. Whoops. Okay. So let me go back to sharing for you. And so this is just another example that I think will hopefully get you excited. There was a study that Stanford Medicine did. It was led by, on the Stanford side, it was led by Thomas Robinson, he's a pediatrician. What they did is they gave an hour and a half intervention. And this goes back to the original thing that I mentioned about Yuval Harari. They did an hour and a half intervention where they, let's see, they did an hour and a half intervention where they taught middle school kids, high school kids, and college students how to make empowered meaning making, which basically, going back to Yuval's comment on stories, this is about the stories you tell yourself about what happens in your life. The whole thing was an hour and a half. It was blind because the teachers did not know which students got which intervention. The researchers left for the duration of that education system. So 3 years on middle school, 4 years on high school. And they did not come back until the end. And then when they came back, they looked at graduation rates, grades, and the willingness to continue education. And also, by the way, these populations were kids who were bullied, girls, and children of color. On all three of those measures, grades, graduation rate, and willingness to go on, these kids had statistically significant increases, right? And specifically, like in the bullying schools, the teacher's report did not report a decline in bullying, but what had changed was how these children interpreted what was happening to them. And so what's important about that, one, is it means that the world doesn't already have to be fixed for us to fix outcomes and to have an impact on outcomes. But imagine this. This is gonna, like, you guys are all gonna love this. Imagine this. Oops. Why? Why can't we use AI and voice bots to challenge our meeting making? That's just like one example of what are the types of things that could be built. I have some more products in here just so you can kind of see what's out there. I'm not really going to go through them because you're going to have the deck and can click around, but people doing emotion recognition. This is going to be important for the world that we're building, this tech world, to understand how we feel, and also for you to understand how the humans who are using your products feel. Pattern recognition. There's some really amazing things that people are using to support people with being able to passively pick up what's going on. There's mood management. You're going to hear from Happify, behavior change. I always mention Pavlik. It's one of my favorite. Focus, emotion tracking, and heart rate variability training. There's wearables, all-in-one trackers, neural stimulation, consumer EEG. Jay's on here. He's designed much of the Muse, which is in the bottom right-hand corner. Hey, Jay. Then you have sleep and meditation and corporate platforms and the haptics that I described. On the upper right-hand side, I think there's a lot of potential for developing things that help make our spaces more supportive to us, our cities and our houses and our cars. VR, AR, really important for empathy and connection, and it's got so many applications that we're just at the beginning of. I use this one just to show you that there's crazy stuff out there. This EQ radio that Mingzer Po created picks up emotions without being on skin. Now, it's still early, and is it perfect all the time? No, it's not, but it's heading in the right direction. And so this part of the presentation is for you guys to know just how much is there and how much you could develop. Also, brain-to-brain communication, many of these things are coming. We're going to have, I know all of this is immediately raising the question of ethics. It's really important for us. That's also why we have the personal development program. And later in the program, when you hear from Ruman, she is, her expertise is AI and machine learning, and she's also going to talk about, how to think about ethics and privacy in that context. So we're going to cover it, but this is just so you can see there's a lot that's possible. So the question, sort of, what's next? And I'm almost done, so we can ask questions. These are some of the things that I think are coming. You're going to see in the next year, you guys are going to be able to have greater layers of emotional sensing. There's going to be a programmatic layer. You're going to see people, and you guys are going to start being able to allow people to subscribe to states, not steps. So it's got to get above like counting things, and it's going to be more about, someone's going to say, I really want to be calm, and they'll subscribe to the calmness. Things are going to get more, and you guys need to make these things more and more passive. And that once someone has given their approval and trusts you and knows that you are on their side, more and more of the hardware and what you're doing to pick up the information will go into the background. It needs to become more and more passive because it's hard when people have to constantly write things out about what's going on. All of our interfaces have to get more and more intuitive and simpler. And as a community, we've got to take on ethics and privacy directly. Tim Chang has got some of these other bigger questions, and he just always stimulates my mind so much. But things like, how do we unbuild the matrix, but at the same time have all this technology around us? How do we empower people in the spirit of play. And these are just some, broader questions that I think it'll be fun to discuss as a community on the broader of what's next. The thing that I will sort of end with is that I'm incredibly optimistic. I really believe that we can solve the social problem, and that we can have more engagement and contribution, and have full human possibility. Because there is no more nobler use of technology than to bring peace to the minds of humankind. And where I first got this from actually was Mikey Siegel, so I'll give him attribution on that. And then with that, I will stop that part, and I'll start to take some questions. But then the last thing I'll say before I'll take some questions is, when we think about the type of tasks that we have to accomplish, and we think about, I think it can seem really overwhelming to think, okay, how do we up level the mental and emotional well-being of the entire human race? Like, that can be, oh wow, that seems like a really big problem. But there recently was a very cool study of online populations that was done at MIT. And maybe Jay knows who did this. I've been looking for the link for you guys. But what they did is they created these small online populations of a few hundred people, and then they paid 25% of the population to express a belief. And then, actually, they experimented up to that 25%. But what they found is that when you got to 25% of a population expressing a belief or having a behavior, when you went to the other 75% and tried to get them to go against that belief, they did things like, what's the name of the group, or what was one of the norms of the group. The other 75% could not be paid to try to force the 25% to change. Now, that explains a lot for, what you've seen with some of the populist movements that are a small number of people who have a very outsized influence. But, that works in many ways too. What that actually means is that, let's say right now there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. When we get to 8 billion, which, won't be that far off, what it actually means for us is that we're actually looking to, fundamentally raise the well-being level of only 2 billion. Now, 2 billion sounds like a lot, but it sounds a lot better than 8 billion. And that, in terms of like what we as a community and all of the other people who are going to join us, what that means. And so we actually have a much more manageable number. And that's why technology, and that's why business, and that's why entrepreneurship, and that's why innovation. Because in order to, have that kind of scale from that very first slide that you saw early on of like what technology does, we have to do it through technology. And in order to have momentum that comes from, an incentive wheel, we have to have businesses, because people like yourselves need to be able to make a living doing this thing that you love. And so that's why, out of all the things we could have focused on, we focus on entrepreneurs and innovation and technology, because it has scale and momentum and creativity. Because you guys are going to be, you're emerging. This is the emerging group. And as more and more uses become available to you, and you're in your communities dealing with specific problems, you're going to come up with things that people have never thought of before. And in this product, and in this month, we're here to help you do that. And so, whether you're an entrepreneur or an innovator, welcome. That's the overview. I know I covered a lot. I have a lot more. I took out a lot of slides of all the things I wanted to tell you, but there's links, and we're going to have more resources for you. And so with that, any questions? Paula, I know, was collecting questions for me. Let's see, because it's hard. Let's see. One of the questions is, do we need a different measure for how we measure success, like a global happiness index? Yeah, I do. I think we do. GDP has, even the guy who developed GDP questions it as a measurement. It was just what they had at the time. One of the things that we're going to be working on next year, which will probably be the bulk of our work next year, is about defining challenges and moonshots specifically for this area. Because, in the beginning, when you saw the data that I shared with you on the state of the global mind, it's actually really hard to find a comprehensive view that can let you know what's going on. Like none of the measures map. It's hard to compare. The UN's got some data, Pew's got some data. Um, there's lots of different things, but it's really kind of hard to see what the data is. And so we're going to be building a coalition to get data that lines up. And then also, if you think about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they are mental and emotional health are sort of hidden in health or are hidden in education. And so as a global group, whether you include all of the hospitals and universities and governments, we don't actually, the world doesn't really have a way to know how we're doing. And if we're making progress, how would we know that? And so there's going to be sort of a large coalition building next year, which will be the bulk of our work on getting that together and also identifying, working with a large coalition to identify challenges that would be suitable for this space. And, that'll be something, people all over the world will contribute to in every region. Okay, let me get another question. Okay, let's see. Can the measures that we discuss help us quantify each individual's level of happiness? Yeah, happiness is a big word. There's a lot of things that go into happiness, and there's measurements, and and you have the positive psychology research, and and certainly there's people argue about what is happiness, and there's a lot of argument over what happiness is and that sort of thing. But what machine learning will allow us to do is to have a level of personalization. And that personalization will eventually, actually, not just potentially, allow you to have individual level, happiness measurement for individuals. Let's see. Paradoxically, will this create more anxiety, stress, depression to get to that happiness level, as some people are more happy than others? That goes back to, I use the word happiness, and I think Yuval uses the word happiness because it's something that people instantly kind of understand what that might mean. They know which stadium you're in, but when you actually get into happiness, there's actually something probably more about meaning and belonging and purpose, which doesn't necessarily mean happiness. That is the type of targets that reduce anxiety, stress, and depression more than sort of happy. So that's a good point. It's just, people use it because it's easy to talk about. On the Stanford study, I will get you guys the link. I had dinner with Thomas a few months ago, and he told me what they had and what they found, and how how excited he was about it. And it wasn't just Stanford; it was several universities, and they used schools all over the U.S. So it was U.S. Because it was funded by grants. This kind of techno-optimism tends to leave people behind. So the question is, why focus on higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy when so many people are still struggling on the first level? So there's a couple of ways to answer that. I would say, first of all, on every team, there's lots of different positions. So like if you're playing soccer, there's a forward. There's people doing different things. Transformative tech does not mean that there is not a role for clean water and energy generation, food production. But one of the things that you will find when you talk to people who are investing in these places, whether they're governments, philanthropists, um, or the different entities that do it, and impact investors, is that people are finding that even though they're putting a lot of resources into these areas, there's some areas that aren't really changing that much in comparison to the amount of funds that are going into it. So what people are starting to get to is this idea that maybe it all starts with your mind. Maybe that's where it starts. And so, getting people's mindset. The other thing too is that when people are in fear, um, they are unable to see options. And so, I think those other areas are very important. This just happens to be my calling, the mind of humanity. And then additionally, my background in this area, I was initially motivated by meditation. And I started out in the monasteries in the East because that's where I was working at the time. So it was easy for me. And so, you didn't really get, um, or let me rephrase it that way, the early contemplative traditions, like the contemplative part of the traditions, which are all around the world, um, they met people where they were at. And that sort of like mental technology met people where they were at. So, this is what I'm focused on. And I think there's relevance all around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think what's exciting is now we have the ability to penetrate the upper levels and reach the kind of numbers that it's going to take to get all of mankind moved ahead. Oh, that's the one thing I didn't mention to you guys before. I have a sense of urgency. And the reason why I have a sense of urgency is that slide that I showed you guys on the future of work and the change in jobs, which by the way is global. Like I saw a test for a Nike sneaker factory that didn't have any people in it at all. So this is not something that is going to, that's not going to be global. It's global. And that bill comes due 10 to 15 to 20 years from now, depending on how pessimistic someone is. The pessimists think it's 10, the optimists think it's 20. So what that means is that we actually don't have a lot of time. We have a decade, but we don't have a lot of time. And so, technology and actually attending to the upper part of the hierarchy, as well as the lower levels, are things that we have to do to get it done. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I agree with someone. Someone just asked if the tech we create is a reflection of our values as individuals and as a society. If our values are selfish and greedy, our tech will be too. But if our values are mindful and compassionate, what might our tech become? Thank you for asking this question. So right now, many people believe because competition and Darwinism and social Darwinism has held sway for so long and how people think about how human beings are. Um, Surely there was competition on the Serengeti, but there was also a great deal of collaboration and a great deal of altruism and a great deal of generosity within groups because that's how you survived. And so everyone here on the planet today, even if people are presenting as selfish and greedy, everyone here had an ancestor who was extraordinary at collaboration because everyone who didn't died. Okay, because it's only really been in the last 1,000 years max that a human being could survive on their own. And we also already know today, because loneliness has a greater impact on your health than obesity, we still know we're still wired to be together. And so I think it's really just been a function of a lot of our technology and a lot of our systems, our economic systems, not really being tied to, 2/3 of our nature, which is collaboration and altruism and being together versus just a small part of, small but significant part of competition. Right now I'm reading The Secret Life of Trees, and the way, there's a premise that people have that, nature is inherently competitive. But I would say that those are people who don't know that much about the forest. What is the trust index called? It's the Edelman Trust Index, and they look at global trust around the world. To, I think, having more measurements lead to more anxiety. This is the part about things going into the background. So one of the people who's going to be speaking at the conference is a guy named Pablo Pardes, who is a researcher in psychiatry and behavioral science at Stanford, and he is fabulous. You guys are going to love him. One of the things he does, because he agrees with you, if you get pinged all the time, if your watch is telling you that you're anxious, it's just going to make you more anxious. So he's done subtle things like, this isn't exactly emotional state, but it'll give you a sense of what's possible. So instead of a watch telling you that you've sat and you should stand up, what he does is he's built a chair, one of the demos that he has, that just starts to tilt a little bit. It's very subtle, but at a certain point, you're kind of uncomfortable enough that you stand up. So, we're just at the very beginning of this. As you guys are thinking about, what you're building, think about making things capture and feedback more and more subtle, because that will make it more and more accessible to other people. Teams working together, yes. Oh, we're almost out of time. So teams working together is one of the biggest issues. Yes, I agree with that. And that's one of the reasons why I really am excited about this need, demand, and means in the future of work, because the people who now are some of the most incentivized to figure out how to raise social and emotional wellness are people who have to run large number of teams, which is another word for companies, businesses like yours, and especially the larger ones. I actually see as very large laboratories to figure out, how to help people raise their social emotional wellness, how to help people create trust and vulnerability between teams. And then sort of like one of the things that I'm really looking forward to, and anyone who wants to work on this out of the innovators, you'll definitely get my attention if you're working on it, is increasing, I think we can figure out group flow. I think that that's a matter of being able to witness the cascade of biosignals, and that, happens on a soccer team at the World Cup when they all become one. And so I think that that's a solvable problem. But when we, as a species, figured out how to trigger group flow, the kind of problems that the transformative technology, group in 2030 or 2050 will have to talk about is that people will say, people really should spend time in solo consciousness, because we like to be together. And the moment we know that we can have that level of, common sensing, then I think you'll see people want to spend more time in that state. And I think it will radically transform human society, and reduce a great deal of conflict. Okay, so guys, it's 11, so we have to go, because we always want to be thoughtful about your time. We'll always, have it start and end at an hour, and we'll handle the rest in Slack. But it's my pleasure. It's like I'm so excited to see you guys in Slack, hooking up and connecting, because this is just the very beginning. We're starting with the Academy, but I believe that, we all have quite a lot to do together. And, the last thing I'll leave you with, especially as you think about the community and, how you'll participate in it, and I wrote this in the Q&A, is that, right now we're at a place where I think our goal should be to develop amazing products that help people, so we can expand usage, so we can get to a large number of people using these things, so people know that this is an option for them, that this is something that they can do. Because if there's ever the time where, we're fighting over the last 1,000 miserable people, then that means that we would have been successful. So right now it really is all about, make the products, the compelling wow products and services that get more people using these types of things, and people knowing that when they have a need, all the way from human support to, defining and moving into what's possible for them as a human being, that they have things that can help them do that. And if we do that, then we will have been successful. So thank you. Thank you for your time. And I'm so grateful for you. So goodbye. I guess, Paula, would you unmute everyone so we could say goodbye?
Hey,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.